Tonight is Lisa Kerr's last night with the Planning Commission after an 8-year service term. We are not going to be with you next time. It will not be the same here, Lisa.
No.
Lisa brought, as we talked earlier, we had a little get together earlier. Lisa brought, for those of you who haven't worked with Lisa or seen Lisa up here before, Lisa brought a passion, fire, diligence, heart to every meeting that I was a part of. Made me better. I had to be better prepared just in case we didn't agree, and that happened now and again. Was a part of several very important decisions for this city. Several that went before LUBA, several that went before the Oregon Supreme Court, and changed the rule of law in this city. As I said, we didn't always agree, but I never doubted your heart, where you were, your intention for the good of this city. So thank you, Lisa. We have a certificate for you for all you've done. This doesn't even begin to.
I said this already, but this has been the most incredible body of people to work with. They're so smart, so prepared, so on top of everything. It's been an incredible pleasure to work with this commission, and I've loved it. And Jeff and I have disagreed so many times, but we've always, but we've always been civil to each other and have respect for each other. And I really have appreciated that too, Jeff. So
Thank you.
anyway, I'm going to really miss it. And
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for your commitment and, sticking with it. I mean, yeah, I think, if we can have planning commission members that are as dedicated as you are, that's all we ask for. So thank you.
good. Well, I think you have that. I do. So
Okay, so with that said, we'll officially call this meeting to order. Like to discuss the agenda for tonight's meeting. Haystack Rock's proposal is listed as coming up at the end of this session, or toward the end. When Haystack Rock was here last week, they stayed until 11 or so. And I had said that we would move them to the top of the list if we could, while we have some other issues that are under timelines that have to be responded to. I do feel like we should listen to Haystack Rock at the head of this meeting rather than the end again. If someone or all of you agree, if we have a motion and a second, that would move them to our first action item for the evening.
I move that we move Haystack Rock to the beginning of the meeting. I'll second.
We have a second. Take a vote on that, Jen.
Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Morris, Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Knopf. Yes. Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay, with that change in mind, may I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
I move to approve the agenda as revised.
Second.
Any discussion? Jen, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Knopf,
Yes.
Second.
Commissioner Matusik,
Here. Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes.
Others?
Moving to consideration of the minutes from our July 28th meeting. Are there any amendments to the meeting, to the minutes? If there are no amendments, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Seconded.
I have a second. Any discussion? Jen, will you call the vote?
What was the second?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
second. Commissioner Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Knopf,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Moving to consideration of the minutes from the August 11th Planning Commission meeting. Are there any amendments to those minutes?
Well, I just had a question. How come the findings and conclusions, are they usually not attached to the minutes? Because I would have felt more comfortable if they had been attached, but maybe that's not necessary.
They're not. I mean, we can put the, if you want, just, I've seen or I've worked with them where they put the motion in and in that, but usually the findings and stuff are not included in
Okay,
that.
because I don't know, I mean, well, I suppose people can go online to see what they are.
And the minutes will be put in the record along with the findings, so they are.
Oh, okay, that's good. All right, that's fine.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll second.
Is there discussion? Jen, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes,
Commissioner Knott,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay, moving on then. We're out of order here, so it's going to take me a minute.
It should be the last thing there.
Got it now. Okay, so this is a work session item. Work session review of the zoning ordinance amendment request by Will Rasmussen on behalf of Haystack Rock LLC for a text amendment regarding notice requirements for application and decisions. Good evening, Mr. Rasmussen. Would you like to make a presentation?
Yes, it's great to see everybody.
Yeah, wow.
And you can hear me. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet in person yet, I'm Will Rasmussen. I'm a land use attorney from North Nash. Here tonight, I'm representing Haystack Rock LLC, the folks who own the Oswald West Cabin. And generally, I've just had the pleasure to have land use applications been in processes in Cannon Beach for 12 years now. And I just got to say the last 8 years with Commissioner Kerr on this commission has elevated the attention to detail that I've brought to my matters in this jurisdiction. The dozens of jurisdictions I interact with, I can't think of more than 2 or 3, just volunteer commissioners that get into the level of detail that Commissioner Kerr does. So thank you for your service to the city. I've definitely had applications where I rued Commissioner Kerr's existence, and I've had applications I'm grateful for Commissioner Kerr's existence. So absolutely a force of nature and will be missed by me when I come through here. I hope you stay involved. So this is just a work session. My request is that you set this for an actual hearing, which is what's supposed to happen when people come in and submit a code amendment application. We paid the fee, we did the homework and submitted it. I wanted to come in person though to try to answer Commissioner Bates's question. I'm going to be super brief in acknowledgement of all that is on the agenda and you guys giving us a chance to speak first. This is an amendment just to enable citizens to request notice of decisions and get notice of this decision. This grows solely out of my client's experience in the Roberts's development application, ongoing development application sagas, where we have repeatedly requested notice of decision. And the answer we've gotten back from the city is we will give you notice if you think notice is legally required. So this is simply a code amendment that said if there's an application of public interest and a citizen asks for notice of a decision, the decision is made, that the city will give that notice. It's something that most jurisdictions just do out of course. It's something that's actually in the code in a lot of jurisdictions. If somebody requests notice in writing, that they can get notice in writing. And you can read it. It's a pretty short code amendment request. And I think it's really straightforward. It is super important though, that this thing move forward and get passed because it impacts public involvement. The number one planning goal in Oregon is citizen involvement, public involvement, and the ability for folks who want to have a say in their community to at least have their voices heard. And if you can't get notice, you can't have your voices heard. And the second major impact is that it changes the process. And that Robert's smaller house application, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, was approved with no notice, no opportunity for folks to be heard. We didn't find out about it, and that's despite us asking for notice and despite it being in some sensitive lands and being in the oceanfront management overlay. The appeal period supposedly ran under the local code. So we had to appeal it to LUBA when we found out, instead of appealing it here to the Planning Commission where it actually belongs. That just isn't how it should work. It's going to result in a whole bunch of extra legal process up on appeal. Hopefully it'll just be LUBA and it'll get back down here, but we'll see. Wouldn't be surprised if it ends up going up and then coming back down here. So that might be 2 years from now before this commission gets to see again. I think it'll be 6 months personally, but anyway, it matters for process and it matters for public involvement. And it's just a request that folks who ask for notice can get notice. And if folks have any specific questions, I'd be glad to answer it. But really my ask is just that you set it for the hearing it's supposed to be set for so that we can really substantively consider it.
I think, and one question I have is, were you finished? I don't want to.
Yeah.
One of the questions that keeps coming to me, I agree with a number of things you said here, but we are in the middle of resetting our code. And this would be kind of, I hate to use the word patching, but it's the first word that comes to me with a system that needs updating. And it will take, I guess my question is there another way to address your concern, or is this the only way to do it? Because I could see this taking a number of months to get it through and not really addressing the concern that you have, or maybe it's less is left.
Yeah, it's the only real way I know of to address the concern. I mean, the city could choose, or I should say city staff could choose to just say, yeah, we'll give everybody a notice who asks for a notice. But the current posture is we'll do what's required by law. So the whole, as a citizen, then the only thing we can do is say, all right, well, let's tweak that law. And folks might recall, this isn't the first time I've been in front of this commission with a zone change, with a code change application to try to make sure we get notice related to Roberts's development stuff. And, staff said, well, geez, Will, I see your code change. That'd be a pain in the rear. Let's do it slightly different and change the code another way to get you guys notice, which we did. And is adopted. But nonetheless, we didn't get notice of this one. So I think something super clear, super straightforward. There's no rocket science. It's just if somebody asks for notice, they can get notice is the easiest way to do it. I'd be very wary of trying to say we'll roll this into a larger omnibus code update. The last time I was here 2 years ago, that was a suggestion, and that omnibus code update is still not moved forward.
Right.
So I don't know why we would tell folks who want to be involved, you gotta wait to get notice for some larger code process.
And I think that the code audit is it could take a long time to get completed. It could be at least a year, and so I think that this issue of notice is so important now, especially with the kinds of applications that are coming into the Planning Commission involving wetlands, sensitive lands. And I think it's really important that people have notice. I think it's fundamental to democracy as far as I'm concerned. And it just has to happen, happen. So I am totally in favor of adoption.
You've heard how much time I took tonight in explaining it. That's about how much time I would anticipate taking at a hearing too. So I don't think it would be a large lift or time consuming matter for this commission or the city council when it got there.
I don't even think it's a big ask. No, I don't.
There is a little bit of, and I'm not saying that I'm against it, but I'm just kind of thinking through it. There is a little bit of liability for the city. If we trip at any point along here, someone doesn't get notice. Have we set a precedent now that they can come? I mean,
that's true already for type 2. So I don't see how that's, the same thing happens. That's true of any requirement we have for notice now, and we do have requirements. What if you leave out a house when you send it out to all the people within a certain amount of distance of an application? You could face that same liability. I don't think you can let that kind of thing stop you from what I see as a due process issue.
And until we get the code updated, you know, our best protection for the types of projects that might raise some questions here are the citizens who are out watching. And I know there are a lot of them, but they have a difficult time keeping up with the projects and even getting basic information about it when they ask. So I agree with Lisa. This is something that this commission needs to take on now. And I think it'll give us some time to take a year or so with the rest of the code updates. At least we will be catching the type of unilateral actions that have caused concerns in the past.
And I think that it actually helps mitigate some risks to it. To your point that some people feel like it's hard getting information out. For Haystack, I've just started submitting, I shouldn't say started, for 2 years now, been submitting public records requests monthly just to try to know, if an approval happened, if there's new information that's come in on the application. And if there was a notice, if we knew there was something in law that we're going to get notice, it would relieve some pressure for that kind of digging, and frankly, hopefully take some pressure off staff that, might be getting requests that more intensive requests than they otherwise might need to.
I'm kind of sympathetic. I've seen the same thing with the Forest Lawn storm sewer move. Citizens trying to get information and really not getting responses that are or answers that are responsive to their request.
And so does staff get to say anything? They're just.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Oh, work session for sure.
At some point, so.
I think I want to hear from Bill on this, and I certainly want to hear from you on this, Jeff.
I have concern about staff time. I mean, we're keep continually piling on more for them to do. And I think we need to be concerned about that.
I think having crisp rules on how things will be processed actually helps relieve staff as opposed to one-offing each application, which is what they're kind of stuck doing right now.
Your proposal on the notice, is it just any official action on the part of the city, or what is it? Any permit, any?
There's a couple of sections of the code implicated. It's largely land use applications. There's also a provision in there regarding streets, basically new streets, roads down right of way. Also relevant for my purposes because of that Roberts situation. So it's not every application in the city. It's largely
Okay, land use, but
Title 17, I think, is the best code.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. So it seemed like there was geology, wetlands, streets, those sections. I felt like, okay, those are critical areas. They do need special attention. But, and maybe I'm just missing this under what you're proposing, 1788, any person, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Will, any person may request electronic notification for any permit. Or is that just related to those three areas?
That's what it is. I mean, that's what it says. If, when this is at a hearing, if the commission said, geez, we see what you're saying here, Will, there's a need for this, but we want to make it only apply in, sensitive areas or to those, that flavor of things. Really, my primary concern is getting notice as it relates to the Roberts application. Like, I think I proposed that in a way that I thought would also solve some other problems that the city has been facing for the last couple of years. But I'm not wedded to that applying universally for what I need for my client. I just think it might be a good policy for the city.
Could we talk about the logistics of what would be involved for staff? So Jeff, I think you could answer this, but it would be very helpful. I would love the idea, but it would be helpful to know exactly how this works logistically so that we can understand what overhead we are asking.
Yeah, so a few points, we have worked with them, just like I said, a year ago to do this. We passed the ordinance. The reason they didn't get noticed because the adoption date, they got the alternative application in prior to that adoption date. So they beat that date, or we wouldn't be probably talking about this again. And so there's the notice that is out there. And so with that process is set up, we put an electronic public notice for all of those that make those decisions that are up there, and you can go to the public notice page on the website. We have an electronic permitting system so that anyone in here can look up an address through Oregon's electronic building permit system and look for whatever permit is going and keep up on the process on that property. So it is very a transparent system out there, and we're trying to improve that. So on the other points is staffing. So logistics of that, like Mr. Rasmussen said, I think we've at least completed 20 or so public records requests for Mr. Rasmussen and this property. At least every month since this process has begun, we have done public records requests for this property. That is a process. It's not simply, it depends on what they ask for, what records they ask for, and then we have to go back and track through whether it's a public document or whether it's an email and all of the various things that they ask for, depending on what detail they ask for. That's a process that can cover many departments. And so we have to go and ask all the different departments for that. And so it's not simply just something we can just, you know, they want it tomorrow. No, we have like over 70 a year of these public records requests. And so, you know, we're a small group, we're a small entity. So we do the best at keeping up with this. I think the number one reason I asked for a code audit 4 years ago and a zoning ordinance changes is because of our processes and procedures. I definitely understand what Mr. Rasmussen is asking. I can't agree more. I want changes to these ordinances. You've heard me say that for 4 years. And yet we come back and I think we slow down the process by doing these patchwork changes when we should be working on those zoning ordinance changes. And we should do a comprehensive development ordinance change that tells these fine folks and every citizen what is the procedure and what is the notice for that. Because if you look at our ordinances, and we'll be talking about this at LUBA, you know, it's conflicting, you know, it's a difficult kind of thing. So anyhow, that's all I've got to say. I recommend that this wait for the code audit, because that will put the pressure to say, let's do procedure first. That's what we should be working on. We talk about size of houses and lot combinations. No, it's your procedures that are getting us into this trouble every step of the way.
Jeff, this is so critical.
It is.
I mean, it's really critical, and that's why I'd like to see it happen sooner rather than later. And I know I've said this before, I've talked to you about this before, the Excella website, which I use to see, I can put in a record number for an area of Clatsop County. I can go online in 2 minutes and I can see building plans, tree removal, everything, just like that, because they've uploaded every single planning permit, building permit, tree removal permit, all of it is downloaded onto this website called Excella, and you can see it in an instant. So they don't have these issues. It used to,
Have that same, you can do that for us.
but I've never been able to find house plans on Excella from here.
But we do not do electronic permitting through a plan review, so we don't have building permits.
See, that's what,
I mean, the actual plan review.
right, that's what I'm talking.
But we are
The seed.
going to that. We don't have, that's the other thing. We don't have the capacity to do that right now. We don't have the equipment and the software and so we're doing that this year though. So
Yeah,
each one of these steps takes time and takes training. So, you know,
but if we just had, this isn't even that. This is much less than getting onto Excella. This is a much lesser burden than trying to.
I'm definitely will respond to that when if we go to hearing, but I don't think it is less of a burden. If anyone any citizen can ask for any property to follow the permitting and ask for any kind of permit that is a big ask for our jurisdiction and our size.
And you're doing it 75.
And I would just ask Mr. Rasmussen to bring me the language from other jurisdictions that do ask that language in their code. And I would love to see that.
Well, I think we're entitled to a hearing, so I will absolutely dump that in.
Yeah.
I'll get you a half dozen examples. It looked like Bill's trying to get in here.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Will, and thank you, Commissioner Newton and counselors or commissioners. You know, the city, let me start this way. The city just like a lot of other cities has a code that developed as a patchwork. You have something that's in place, then you make changes to fit something, then state law changes and you make changes to do that. And you know, that's sort of the purpose of the code audit, to deal with that, to deal with some of those ongoing conflicts and things that weren't put in comprehensively. And I think that, as Jeff indicated, that's an important thing that this, you know, really should be at the focus. And if that's done right, hopefully it takes care of a lot of these issues. The other issue is something that Commissioner Kerr said about, you know, tracking and having all this stuff available at your fingertips where you can get to it. Again, that's something the city should prioritize, but whether, because it's a smaller jurisdiction, it's much smaller in Clatsop County, and because, you know, the funds weren't there to build in this type of permitting system, it isn't there yet. And again, that's not unusual for smaller cities throughout the state and throughout the country. And hopefully, you know, once those two things are accomplished, I think this whole problem goes away. Having said that, you know, the state has certain requirements for notice, and those are uniform throughout the state. They change occasionally, not that often. And that's what people are used to. And that's generally what's in our code. And this provision would change that, and that's okay. The city certainly has the ability and the right to say, we're going to provide more notice than what state law requires us to do. But what it does is get to something that Jeff said, not so much about staffing, but tracking. You know, who knows how many people request it. It may be just 2 or 3, and it's not that big an issue, but it has a potential for anybody in the city to request information about any other property in the city. And keeping track of that when we already don't have where that lets us do the things that Commissioner Kerr identified just adds another layer that, when we don't have the technical ability to do it, requires, you know, it just adds this layer that may be difficult to deal with. And, you know, I'll let Jeff certainly talk to the staffing ability, but that's really ultimately my thought is, you know, is it technically feasible to do it? And if that technical feasibility is there, you know, then my guess is that we probably already at the place where Commissioner Kerr was indicating. So that's just sort of my observation. It's certainly something the city can do. The question is it feasible for the city to do it in a way that works? And if so, does that feasibility mean that we have the capability to do things in a way that obviates the need for this provision?
I want to be clear too, this conversation danced around. I'm not asking for a database that lists every bit of information ever submitted. I just want one, you know, not even a database, just a list where folks can say, hey, I want notice of the decisions on this, on this development. You know, it's just a notice of decision. I'm not asking for everything all the way along. And I frankly thought this was going to be a very non-contentious proposal, just to try to get notice of decisions for the citizens who want that. I'm sure if every time I've emailed interested people that this thing's going on, there's been a bunch of interest. I'm sure they'd come and tell you they feel like they're not involved without the ability to get notices of those decisions. So, and also I'm kind of surprised because, you know, like 3 months before this house was approved on this Roberts site, this commission denied the stability beam that 3 months later got approved as part of this house proposal, and the planning commission couldn't have any involvement because there was no notice given. Like there's I wouldn't say games that can be played with it, but I'm just surprised that this is contentious, I guess is all.
I think it's a
I
balance.
do want to weigh in response to that really quickly. You know, we can talk about anecdotes and, you know, I don't want to go down that path. What I do want to talk about is from an individual owner's perspective, I just want notice about what's happening next door to me. Relatively easy. But as you said, there may be 20 other people who want this, and multiply by the number of applications in the process, and trying to keep track of that when you don't have the electronic capability to sort of identify that, becomes a matter of it's just much more complicated from the inside than it appears from the outside.
And I think I would echo that. And so how I feel personally about the issue that you've been on the front, things I didn't agree with, things this commission didn't agree with. But that said, and we were just talking about this before the meeting came on, these are the ins and outs of these, until you've looked at 500 pages, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here. You get paid more than I do for looking at it.
Yeah.
It's phenomenally complicated. And the last thing I want to do is approve something that, or support something that I didn't agree with. But I also don't want to throw the people who are making those decisions into more chaos. Decisions I don't agree with, processes I don't agree with. I'd like to try to work to get smoother. And I'm concerned that I'm adding more bureaucracy to that process. And that puts me in a defensive position. I don't want to do that to them because they've got enough of that already. And I hear what you're saying on the games, and certainly we've seen what could be perceived as that, or maybe there is. All we can deal with is what is in front of us and the processes that we can see. And I know the processes that we have now are highly imperfect, that we're being asked to review are highly imperfect. I'm afraid of making them more complicated than they already are.
I think you're asking to sacrifice people's right to public access to what is going on in their town because of the administrative complications. And I don't think that's a good way to look at this at all. I think this is very straightforward. I don't think.
Is it just as straightforward as a wetland issue where you look at the processes there and we go, how could something like this happen? Or how does this happen? It's straightforward until you have to live it. It's
Okay.
straightforward until you have to execute on it. And there's so much nuance. Please, go ahead.
So have you looked at the website with the e-permits and the public notices? Because I know that Jeff, you took us through a tutorial how to do that.
Mhm.
Have you looked through that? And do you feel that if you go log on, you can find the information you're looking for?
I'm not familiar enough with this one to kind of say what
So I wonder
what Cannon Beach is using,
If
but
Jeff was to walk through with you the process, they actually do have all the public notices permit. And I'm assuming anytime there's a decision made, you update that.
was the Roberts in smaller house decision posted on that in the appeal period?
Like I said earlier, because it was, the application was prior to the adoption date. That's why it wasn't.
But if it was now, would it?
Yes, it would be. That's the whole thing. I think that's where we're at, is that,
Sorry, please finish.
go ahead, Will.
Well, I was just gonna say that, that funky notice provision, or I shouldn't say funky notice provision, that amendment that you're talking about only relates to the road. Right? I mean, that's the access piece, and the small house was a small house. So there, if you take the road aside, that small house, which is still in the oceanfront overlay, in the active landslide on a steep slope, and at the exit of the, S curves, the Hemlock S curves, would still not get noticed today if it was just that house. And that,
We're debating whether we hold a hearing on this or not.
Can I do one thing?
That's crazy. Let's just have a hearing on it.
Commissioner Bennett has had his hand up for some time. I'd like to acknowledge. Commissioner Bennett, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that, Jeff and the staff have limited resources. When you add on to it, something on the other side gets less attention. So you have to, he's busy with the code audit and the whole thing, and just adding on more work, something else suffers.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Charles, we don't know. We're taking Jeff's word, and I think he was probably right. We're taking, I'm sorry, I forgot Will's word. Lisa's been here and seen things. I have. Why don't we just have a hearing on this and we can get all the information out and make a decision as opposed to speculating now that this might be difficult. We might not have the equipment to do it. It might make it harder on our city staff. Well, if it does, let them bring in the information. Jeff offered to do it. Let's have the hearing.
I agree with you.
But one,
The other thing I have to say is you're talking about, sacrificing administrative time for something, Charles. That house, the planning commission, the smaller house, we said no on that project with the beam. We said no unequivocally, and then now it's there. Now that was approved, the smaller house. If that's wouldn't show up on the new way that the city is doing its notifications online, then that is not good enough. And I'm sorry, to me, this seems like a no-brainer. I mean, it really does.
I mean, if the commission is genuinely concerned about staff burden, there are ways I could narrow this, so, it's not citywide and other things. I just proposed it that way because I thought that's what the city would want. But if staff is genuinely concerned about this being overly broad and being hard to track, there are certainly ways to shrink its application. I just
Don't negotiate with yourself.
Yeah, I don't think shrinking its application is the right way to go either. I tend to agree with Lisa on this 100%, but I'm all for a hearing. So why don't we just have a hearing and move on from there?
So make a motion. Let's have a hearing on this proposal. We can do it specially or we can do it during our regular course meetings, but let's have one. And then we can have an intelligent discussion based on facts and not speculation.
I was under the impression we were entitled to a hearing, but
Yeah.
Well, I second your motion.
any discussion?
Is a motion
It's a-
necessary?
It's a work session item.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
and they can move to set it on next month's agenda, which we would love.
Yeah, okay. So I move to put it on next month's agenda.
I second.
Yeah, I second.
Oh, can we do it?
It's a work session item. Can you make a motion?
We'll,
Say we want to do it.
we will put it on the, yeah,
Okay, well,
and that's not a,
we don't need a motion.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, all this was a work session to see if it'd go on an application and an agenda. So
Jeff, is there, just for one thing to think about between now and then, is there any kind of timing requirement relative to when a permit comes in and you post on the website? Or any kind of, so I noticed that the conditional use we're looking at on Elk Creek Road is on the website. What's the timing between when you get that application and when you post it? Is there any?
So if an application comes in,
Yeah.
whether it's,
How quickly do you post?
well, it's entered into the Acela system
It's entered in on
as a land use side.
in a couple of days?
Yeah, in the module. Well, when we consider it complete.
Okay.
I'll review it and consider it complete.
Well, it goes on the public notice page as soon as we post the public hearing notice.
Well, that too, but he was just asking when's the application get,
When's it visible?
when's it visible?
Electronically, yeah, that was what I was asking. Okay, thanks.
Really appreciate everybody's time and attention. And Commissioner Kirk, congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're moving to a legislative matter. Continuation consideration of CP 22-01, adoption of the Cannon Beach Transportation System Plan as supporting material to the comprehensive plan. CP 22-01. Jeff Adams, on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach, seeks the adoption of the Cannon Beach Transportation System Plan as supporting material to the Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plan. The TSP is in accordance with the Oregon Revised Statutes, OAR 660, Division 12, Transportation Planning Rule, which implements statewide Planning Goal 12. The request will be reviewed against the criteria of the Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plan and Municipal Code, Section 17.86.070A, amendments, criteria. Is there a motion to approve with conditions deny the application?
Can I just ask a quick question, Jeff? So you got Lisa's comments, right? And there were no other changes since?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are those changes? Are they in the TSP now?
Yeah, so what we will do is that, like, Eddie said, we made notes of those and those will be entered in as recommendations for the for the city council.
Okay, so those would be, they're just, right now, they're just recommendations to the city council for changes.
Right.
But yet you want us to approve the TSP without them.
With those recommendations.
With the recommendation.
Yeah.
Any reason why we wouldn't just put them in and have us approve them? I mean, is there a procedural issue there?
Not that I know of.
I think we
I would feel much more
move ahead with that.
approving the TSP if those were actually in we voted on it unanimously.
Yeah.
That we wanted those changes in the TSP. I don't see why they should be parentheses on because that's what they are. I mean, they're just recommendations. I think they should be in the TSP and then we can approve it.
Do I have a second for that?
Is this?
What is the
Or
motion?
was that a motion?
Okay, I make a motion that the changes that we voted on unanimously be included in the TSP before we approve it.
Or could we vote to approve with the changes in the TSP and send it on to city council?
I'm happy with that too, Lisa.
Would you want to see it first? I mean, I'd want to see it in
trust that
there.
If I trust that the recommendations have been made, I trust that they will be put into the TSP.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll have a work session with the city council, the document.
Yeah.
If you have issues with it, then you can raise those issues. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Is that a
Sure, it's a motion.
that's a motion?
You need to remove Lisa's motion.
Oh,
Want me to take back my motion?
Hi.
And I guess I.
my bullets.
It's not gonna happen.
You gotta be kidding.
Or you can amend the motion. We have one on the floor.
Well, I don't see how that's a change. So we're gonna adopt it with the recommendations. We're back to square one.
Included in the TSP. The
They will be
recommendation.
included in the body of the TSP.
Presented to the council.
Wait, would you like that as a strike through type of thing, or do you want them inserted as, clean or?
Either way, it doesn't matter.
For fairness to city council, I think they should know what changes.
I agree with that.
we discussed.
Right, so the strike through seems
I
more
think the
honest.
Strike through is honest,
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, and I'll have a clean version as well.
right? They can see both.
Okay.
okay, in that case, I feel comfortable.
You just amended it, so
Well, so the motion is her move to make the changes be made. Changes may be included in the body of the TSP before you approve it. That was,
So we would approve, changes would be made in the body for presentation to city council.
right, so her original one though said before you approve it, so we want.
Right, so someone else can make the motion then, a new one. Whatever it is. I'm not exactly sure what it is.
it's, we approved the TSP with the recommendations you offered on whatever date for presentation as a complete package,
July 28th.
Put it in the,
including the two for presentation to the council.
A second. That was your motion.
That was, well, yeah,
His motion.
sorry.
Is there any further discussion? Jen, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes,
Commissioner Knopf,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
You're muted, Aaron. Uh-oh, he ran down the hall. Let's come back to him.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Bennett,
Yes,
Chair Newton.
Yes.
I think it's passed.
can I
We were just messing with you.
I just wanted to ask you a question. I sent out these changes because I was asked specifically at the meeting to write them down, everything that we'd agreed on in sort of secretarial form and send them to you. And I sent them to everybody. And I was told that that was not according to you because it was sort of, and that I don't understand, because if I'm asked to write down what we all decided on, how is that, that's not, we're not making any decision. So how is that not an okay thing to do?
I just, we try not to have any kind of reply alls as a serial, and we'll be going over this actually, this very thing. We don't have the final date, do we, Jen, on the training yet?
No, I haven't.
We will come out this month with the date on our next training. And we'll go over this, but ours is to discourage any kind of that kind of horizontal to reply all, where, yeah, it's not so much honestly like you with that first one that you're sending, but what happens if somebody replies all, then that's where it's a cascade of a serial, is a threat. It's like a threat.
If they were to reply all and say, oh, I don't,
Yeah.
I have another one I want to add, or then.
That's where I'm worried.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and what drives that is a definition of what a public meeting is. In ORS 192.610, it says convening of a governing body for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or to deliberate towards a decision. And so there's been some court cases that say exchanging information about the merits of a decision is deliberating towards a decision. And so sending out information, okay, but as soon as those reply all start, you start getting deliberation.
Bill, could we get around that by just simply agreeing that everything that we send out goes on the public record and, in the packet?
No, because to the extent you have what's known as a serial meeting, as Jeff indicated, essentially deliberations and a decision made electronically, it's got to be made in public.
Okay.
And that's a difficulty. If it's an email among the city or the planning commission, it's not in public.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Our next item is also a quasi judicial hearing, public hearing and consideration of the 22-01 David Venata request on behalf of Cannon Beach BP LLC for a variance to allow residential use for 55% exceeding the 50% threshold for mixed use of a general commercial zone. David Venata, on behalf of Cannon Beach BP LLC, requests a variance to allow residential use for approximately 55% of the building floor area versus the 50% maximum allowed. The property is located at 368 Elk Creek Road, tax lot 200, map 51029CA in a general commercial C2 zone. The request will be reviewed under the Cannon Beach Municipal Code, section 17.24.020, general commercial zone, uses permitted outright, and 17.84.030, variances, criteria for granting. Does anyone object to the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time?
I do.
Please come forward.
Holly Champion, and I live on Elk Creek, my PO Box 614. And I've been talking to my neighbors since this is just recently posted. They know nothing about it. It also involves a wetland. And we would like this to be held for another meeting, so we have time as people who live on Elk Creek know more about this.
So, Bill, we can continue this. I mean,
Yeah, so the question, I understand this comment, but the question is really whether or not the Planning Commission has the authority to make this decision. And, this is a time for questions about the authority. To the extent you want more time, the time to bring that up is in the hearing itself. And so that's certainly something the Planning Commission can consider when as the hearing moves forward in its deliberations. But I'm not hearing a challenge to the actual jurisdiction and authority of the Planning Commission.
I don't know that I can challenge the commission, but I can say as a resident, I would certainly like to be able to have public input on this particular item.
Absolutely.
Ms. Chairman, we will consider the item you brought forward as a part of our deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or a personal bias?
No.
Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit?
Site visit.
Site visit.
Like this.
I visit.
Jeff, may we have the staff report, please?
I'll let Robert take that.
Yes, so the requested variance is to exceed the 50% limitation on residential space in conjunction with commercial uses and remove the requirement to provide a buffer between parking spaces and the proposed structure. The subject property is zoned general commercial C2 and is currently occupied by multiple tenants, including commercial operations, warehousing, and personal storage. The proposed development would be a 2-story structure with 7 storage units on the ground level and 4 apartments on the upper. A 2-story mixed-use structure similar to the one proposed currently exists in building 4 on the southeast corner of the business park. At the lower level of this building consists of 5 storage units, and the upper level is a mixture of professional spaces and apartments. So as this is limited, this application is limited simply to building square footage and the landscaping requirement. The proximity of a wetland is not pertinent to this application. However, it is noted that the wetland is immediately adjacent to the property, and we consider that this application is part of a multi-step process that would be the review of this application. This wouldn't be a one and done type of approval. This would be a multi-step approval. So this is only part of that. And a wetland lot of record could apply to further review down the road. So due to its nature, this project is subject to various types of review. And we have not yet had final plans submitted, and there would be additional information that we would need to be to determine whether or not a conditional use permit would be required because of its proximity to the wetland. So moving on to the applicable criteria, this is a use permitted outright in the C2 zone as it is a warehouse or storage establishment and a residential use in conjunction with in conjunction with that permitted use, with the exception of the building floor area, which would need to have a variance to exceed 50%. And also moving on into off-street parking. As far as the design, actually moving into the landscaping. Currently, there is no significant amount of landscaping on the interior portions of the business park. And the proposed development would necessitate the removal of trees. The site plan submitted does show the placement of 2 new trees in the parking area. However, this is not a landscaping plan. As I said before, we have not yet received final plans from the applicant. So without a variance, the application does not meet the 10% minimum landscaping requirement or 1 tree for every 175 feet of landscaping of required by municipal code. If a variance is granted, a condition of approval should be the inclusion of a landscaping plan that maximizes landscaping and tree placement or replacement opportunities across the business park. Due to the necessity of having unobstructed access to ground level storage units, the requirement to have a landscape separation buffer between the building and a parking area is considered to be impractical. That would restrict vehicular access. One additional concern is based on the requirement, no fewer than 4 of the 18 parking spaces shown on the site plan would be dedicated. Must be dedicated to the 4 dwelling units. Additionally, any apartments in building 4 would need no fewer than one of the remaining parking spaces each. There is no information regarding current parking demand by non-residential tenants, or if the aggregate amount of off-street parking would be sufficient to meet the anticipated total level of demand. The proposal cannot meet the off-street parking criteria unless a variance exempts those the application of the code. The application regarding variances and criteria for granting. The application states that the municipal code does not address use-specific attributes of business parks versus general commercial uses, and that the application of requirements regarding separation between parking spaces and the storage unit doors effectively interferes with the functioning of tenant areas by cutting off direct vehicle access. It further states that the proposed development may have a positive impact on the economic health of the community by providing uses that support businesses and provide opportunities for needed housing at a price that may be accessible to persons who work in the community. However, there has been no proposed deed restrictions or development arrangements that would guarantee the housing provided that would fall into the affordable or workforce housing range.
Okay, thank you. Is there any additional correspondence that we haven't seen?
No, I did reach out to the fire department asking them about the lane width in the parking, but I haven't heard back from them.
The way I hear you, Robert, is we got a tentative plan. You haven't given your approval, really, you can't, because you don't have enough information and you want us to approve it.
So the only thing being asked about is a variance specific to the amount of residential space on the building and a variance to landscaping and off-street parking requirements. So there would be other aspects of this application, such as its proximity to the wetland, which doesn't pertain to off-street parking or the or the square footage. And so that's information that would be reviewed farther down the road in a review process.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Charles.
First of all, is it 55% or closer to 60%? There's a statement on page 3 of the staff comment. It says that there may be up to 60%. And then secondly, is there a reason for this variance, or is it just they want more residential space?
So I calculated it out to be between 55 and 60%. It's an approximate number. And as far as the reason for the variance, part of it is because the C2 zoning district restricts residential use in conjunction with commercial to 50%. So they would need a variance to exceed that square footage percentage threshold, and also to have a variance to de-restrict the parking somewhat.
I think he's asking though, why is the top floor 55 to 60%?
The applicant will have to answer that.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought that was Charles' question.
Yeah, my understanding.
The same question, Charles, but it's for the applicant, not,
Yeah, to my understanding would be to make the apartments larger.
right. The question is why?
Let's
Let's
let
let her hear
the
from you.
applicant touch on that. Okay, at this time, we'll call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff report and listed on the criteria sheets of the meeting page, of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code, which the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuance of the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name, mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Yes, my name is David Veneta, Tolovana Architects, Post Office Box 648, Tolovana Park, 97145. And to ask the most immediate question, that is exactly why we're asking for a variance in order to make the second floor larger in floor area, just in terms of a more spacious design for the individual units themselves. What we try to do is make the in respect to the wetlands. We tried to make the footprint of the building as small as possible. We realized that the site is only so large, the wetland delineation indicated a certain buildable area on the site. However, being able to make the second floor larger via a cantilever would be desirable. It also would replicate, if you notice in the staff report, there's a picture of the existing buildings on the site already. They actually have what I call a little eyebrow roof of 2 feet that provides weather protection over the doors. I thought in lieu of providing or duplicating that detail, it would be more advantageous to actually cantilever the second floor out by that same 2 feet, thus gaining some additional usable square footage and providing weather protection for the overhead doors as well. So that's the thought process that went through. I thought roughly 55 to 6% variance would be a reasonable amount to ask because of the functional advantage it gives both to the floor space of the units as well as the weather protection to the building. So hopefully that answers.
There's it means over on the back too, right, David? I mean, there's
That does.
cantilever on the back also.
That does. And that's very similar to the easternmost building that was photographed and included in the staff report. Part of that is to cantilever the walkway that's serving the second floor apartments. And again, the idea, of course, is to absolutely stay away as far as possible from the wetland with the actual building structure. And when we're able to do that via cantilever.
So some of that slab, then that 3-inch topping slab over the 2.5 corrugated metal, 2.5-inch corrugated metal actually cantilevers over the wetland a little bit too, right? The bottom floor slab? I can't tell from this drawing.
No, it actually doesn't. No, only the walkway.
Only the walkway.
Yeah, correct.
So that gabled wall there, what was that called? That gable basket wall? What was that? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, the actual foundation wall.
Are you gonna put the foundation on top of that? Of your building?
Actually, the building is going to be founded on piers. And these are going to be drilled anchors into the ground rather than the old method of actually pounding a pier into the ground. Too much impact to surrounding properties.
Those shows up on your drawings. Was the intention to suggest that that was gonna go all the way across then, correct?
Actually, there's a series of beams that span in the north-south direction over the top of those piers.
But so those beams extend over the wall
Correct. Mhm.
and then the piers come up through the wall or outside the wall?
Actually, outside the wall. Yeah.
Okay, and can that wall bear the weight? I mean, how much weight will that wall carry?
Well, really, it's the piers that carry the weight.
All of it?
Yeah.
You're saying that there will be no weight on that wall?
Correct. Mhm. Correct. It's just a retaining wall to retain the grade.
And these piers, I see your drawing is pretty simple. I mean, all of these have been pretty stripped down, but it sure looks to me like this pier is outside the wall on the, probably not on the wetland, but.
Correct. Yeah, it is. It is outside the wall.
So you've cantilevered that whole back into that building out. How many feet? You don't even give us the dimensions here.
Yeah. I believe it's in the neighborhood of about 4 feet.
So you go out 4 feet behind it.
Mhm. And then the walkway is an additional 4 feet.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
Well, I see the wall, the gabion wall. Okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I see it now that it's inside the foundation.
In fact, there's an existing retaining wall there now along the edge of the parking. It's nothing more than a wooden retaining wall, however. And so, yeah.
Oh, so your reason for asking for a variance on the percentage of floor coverage of the residential areas is just because you want to make them bigger?
More comfortable, yes, exactly.
These
More efficient floor plans, frankly, a better design for the unit.
bigger.
Yeah, correct. But they're still relatively small square footage.
Gosh, I would think it would be just easier all along, just to move that top floor. Well, I don't know.
And eliminate the cantilever and add a highbrow roof similar to the other building.
Well, I'm just, yeah, I'm not so worried much about the front, but I went and looked at that gabion wall, and how long has that been in there? A long time? And
Long time. Actually, the gabion wall is going to be the new wall. It's going to take the place of the existing wood wall that's there now.
well, when you walk back behind that, I saw the concrete blocks on the east end.
Right.
And then there was kind of a gabion wall there from where those concrete blocks end, all the way to almost to that new other building on the other side. So there's gabion wall there all the way through, right? So you're going to take that out.
Yeah, we are going to replace that. I mean, it's been there all the time.
Old. And I was reading up on these gabion walls because you see them as decorative items, but they never ever publish anything about the ability to handle a load in any way whatsoever, except that they tend to blow out on the sides. Is that how they work? I mean, you get a little bit of water in there and you get a little bit extra, maybe the pier sinks a little bit and you get a little weight on that wall. Wouldn't it just kind of blow it out?
No, not really. It's really a function of the mass of the wall itself, the gabions. So we'd be consulting with a structural engineer.
And I think that's my point is I'd like to see a structural engineer. I mean, I don't feel like this proposal is anywhere near close enough to be ready for us to approve it.
Yeah, and that's fine. I was going to mention, we have no objection to a continuance here. I mean, there's obviously additional information requested. There's a request for more information from the neighborhood. I wouldn't have a problem with that. And I'd be happy to provide more information.
Yeah, I'd like to know how many extra square feet you're looking at
Sure.
for structure,
Yeah,
Adding-
for that added 2 feet.
the added additional.
Right. Yeah,
And isn't it possible to redesign it so you don't, but just by using creative design methods so that you don't really need a variance at all for square feet and you could say.
oh yeah, we could build this without the 2 foot, without the
Right,
variance.
and if you put your creative juices to work, could probably think of a design that would work well without having to go beyond the 50%, couldn't you?
Oh yeah, we could build it without going beyond the 50%.
So then you look at your piers. Thank you, Lisa. I don't mean to interrupt, but you look at your piers and you look at the wetland as it's superimposed over it. And that wetland boundary goes right up to that gabion wall at some point. Now, my assumption is, and I'm probably wrong, but if you're hanging over that wall by 4 feet, you're in the wetland boundary, are you not?
We're cantilevering over it, yeah.
But where are your piers going to go?
Well, they would not exceed the wetland boundary. No,
Well, that boundary, it looks like it's right up to that gabion wall, right? It's just, so it's again, it's really hard to tell from what you
yeah,
presented.
yeah.
Mr. Veneta, what is the date of that wetland delineation that you are basing these drawings on?
It is within a year.
It's within 1 year old?
Yes, it is. It's very current.
And is there more detail than mentioned? You'd be okay providing additional information? We didn't get a whole lot of information. It'd be nice to have the rest of it.
Report. Absolutely. That I'm happy to provide that as well.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
So your soils report, your wetland delineation, is there anything?
required to do a soils report.
Well, he's getting.
Yeah,
soil.
we'll be getting a soil
Want
report
to see?
as part of the building permit process. I wasn't anticipating providing that.
Well, it seems like if we're going to approve your plan, that we should consider all the issues.
Why don't we come back to that discussion? We'll let Mr. Veneta finish his presentation here from the others, and then we can talk about what we want.
Absolutely.
The existing building, the apartments, how big are they? Square footage of the building that's already there.
Oh, the easternmost building, they're right around 1,200 square feet. Actually, I had my office in that building for a number of years. And so we had the south half of the building and there was an apartment on the north half. Each of them were about 1,200 square feet. And subsequent to me moving out of my office space, it was converted to a second dwelling, second apartment. So approximately 1,200 square feet.
And how much are these? Oh, here they go. They're 614.
Right. So these are considerably smaller.
Where do you think 614?
Right here under that,
And you'd be willing to put a
3 by 26.
restriction on
That's 67.
forced housing or low income.
Yeah, I'll be, what I'd like to do is revisit that with a continuance. I'd like to discuss it further with the owner. I can tell you, he recently purchased this property about 3 years ago, I think. And even though he's a homeowner here in Cannon Beach, he isn't as familiar with the workforce housing stipulations and restrictions. So I'd like to visit that with him too. And as part of the continuance, that would give me time to do that. So
But Mr. Veneta, just to be clear, you're formally asking for a continuance to this.
yes, I would
Thank you.
do formally.
Thank
I think that's general consensus anyway, frankly. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
And again, as an occupant of the business park, I was there to observe, traffic patterns, the use of the buildings. So I have firsthand knowledge of kind of how the parking is utilized. What we don't have is, and I need again to take more time to do this for your benefit as well, but determine what the real parking ratios are, because as you know, a business park isn't really scheduled in the zoning ordinance as far as the ratio. I mean, we've got 1.5 per 400. It's kind of the base, across the board. I talked to staff about this. So part of what needs to happen, I believe, is some kind of analysis of what the parking uses are of the building. I can tell you again from my firsthand knowledge that the majority of the tenants in the business park aren't really building occupants so much as building users. So they come and go. They store materials there, but they don't really occupy as far as any type of business location. There's plumbers that use it. There's building supply, wood flooring contractors. There's a laundry facility in there. But none of them are working necessarily in the buildings as such. So I think aside from staff's kind of outline of the floor plans and the list of the tenants here, I think if we can provide you with more data on what those particular tenants do, what their businesses are, and what their actual use of the buildings are, I think would be handy for your decision making as well.
Might be helpful to also have some understanding of their parking requirements.
Yes, exactly. And I can tell you what's a little hard to do is the parking requirements. And again, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, are kind of dynamic. I mean, they come and go. I'm almost going to have to do a survey, frankly, to find out what their hours of parking use are. For example, a laundry facility, they come and they go, but they aren't there all day. So there's some overlap with parking as well. It's kind of, again, a dynamic thing, but I'll do my best.
Please allow.
Yeah. Season 2.
Games, including in the postseason.
Football.
I didn't either.
I don't think it was a question.
Neither.
I think Bill's got something there.
Bill, go.
Thank you, Chair. And just before Mr. Veneta goes away, if in fact the continuance is something the Planning Commission is considering, we'd want to have an idea of the length of the continuance and then the willingness of the applicant to waive the 120-day rule for that concurrent with the continuance.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to nail me down? Okay. Actually, I don't see an objection to the 120-day limit. No. I mean, I've been working on this with the owner for quite some time, and frankly, I could use more than 120 days if that's the option.
So you're okay with us taking longer, potentially taking longer than 120 days in this process? Okay, thank you.
And can we just extend it by 60 days? Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
that sounds good.
And then we either continue to a date certain, or we'd have to renotice the entire thing, and renoticing isn't an issue, but that's, I'll let the planning commission handle that.
Okay, well, why don't we come back to that? Go through the rest of the any other presentations, Mr. Pineda, are you aware of any other presentations by the applicant? Are you it tonight?
No, I'm it tonight.
Okay, all right, well, we'll give the proponents an opportunity to speak. And any response. Sound good? Thank you, Mr. Pineda. Are there, to be formal, are there any other presentations by the applicant? Are there any other presentations by proponents? Are there presentations by opponents? Is there a staff response?
Yeah, I would suggest, sorry, Robert, I would suggest that, we can renotice and we can extend the notice to include, I think, we normally 100 feet or whatever, but we can extend notice to 200 feet if you
Okay.
want to do that.
Okay,
Let's do it. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, and so then I would say, if that's a suggestion, then that notice requirements, I would say then if we could do it to a November hearing, that gives them time to get their materials ready.
okay, we will move this to our November meeting. Okay, do we want to move on? Anybody want to say anything for thoughts on this, or are we moving on? Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we'll move to our next quasi judicial.
Okay, yeah, good.
Dave? Already.
Oh, they never had like a COVID problem,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, because I used to go to all of them. Fine.
I bought raffle tickets for.
I didn't even see them advertised.
Okay, let's call this meeting back to order. Our next item is also a quasi judicial hearing. Public hearing and consideration of the CD, and I'm going CP 22-01 and CU 22-03. David Renata, the request on behalf of Patrick Dave LLC for a 7-lot conditional use permit cluster development subdivision in the wetland overlay zone. CD 22-01, CU 22-03, David Renata on behalf of David Pietka, request for a conditional use permit to allow a cluster development consisting of 5 single-family dwellings and a 4-plex apartment. The property is located within the southwest corner of First and Spruce Street, tax lot 4402, map 5103 or 30 AA in the limited commercial C1 zone. The request will be reviewed under the Cannon Beach Municipal Code, Title 16 subdivision and 17 zoning, including section 16.04.130 subdivision applicable standards, 16.04.400 variance cluster development, 17.22.030 conditional use permits, and 17.43.040 through 050 conditional uses and activities permitted in a wetland and wetland buffer area. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or a personal bias?
No.
Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made correspondence?
Site visit.
Site visit.
That's it.
Site visit.
And I actually was involved, it probably about 6 months ago, I had this property under contract to purchase and worked with Mr. Veneta a little bit on the study of the project. So I've had site visits and I don't believe I have any bias. We ultimately obviously did not decide to go forward with the purchase, and I don't think I have any bias.
And you're not bitter about it?
Not bitter. No, quite happy actually.
Okay. May we have the staff report, please?
Just wanted to make note that we did receive material since the plant packets went out. And I also want to say thanks to Jen for covering for Katie while Katie's got COVID. And so, yeah, it's going around everywhere. And so thanks to Jen, and she's helping us pull this together. And so we had Exhibit A4, which is a Cola Square condominium alternate site plan, this addendum packet. We also had public comment from Jack and Patricia Klinigan, Ronald M. Shapiro, and Barb Henthorn, and those are all included in that addendum packet. And then we just received one also after the addendum packet, but also put it on your table there from the Cola Square HOA Board's Secretary Jeff Burlingham, and that's the other single sheet there. So I wanted to touch on that first, and then for the staff report, Davis Spruce LLC is requesting a tentative plan approval of a cluster development subdivision of tax lot 51030AA04402. The project site is generally located in the intersection of Spruce and First Street. As a project site contains wetlands mapped on the city's local wetland inventory, they're subject to the Cannon Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 1743, the wetland overlay zone, where the applicant is requesting a conditional use approval as required by CBMC 1743-040 through 45 for petitions or subdivisions within the wetlands and wetland buffer areas. As shown on the preliminary partition plan, the proposed partition would create 7 lots intended for 5 lots of single-family residential dwellings, 1 for a multifamily fourplex, and a common lot for shared access and parking, for a total of 9 dwelling units. Single family and multifamily dwellings are also a conditional use in the C1 limited commercial zoning area and subject to conditional use approval of CBMC 1780, 020, and 110. And so I'm going to touch on some of the elements of the planning commission, the staff report. And I started with addressing all the general development policies that are included in the comprehensive plan and made notes of the applicable ones there. As you know, there's not a density requirement assigned to a commercial zoning district. Only the residential districts carry that zoning in our comprehensive plan. Onto the variance, the 1604-400 variance of a cluster development. So they're asking for a cluster development rather than the traditional straight lot subdivision. And off-street parking, shared access easement for lot 1 of the common area of the preliminary plat map is requested to allow cluster development where strict adherence to the traditional zoning code, such as a 25-foot access per lot and lot dimensional requirements, prohibits flexibility to allow what the applicant states in the application as much needed affordable housing in downtown. There's nothing in the application materials other than dimensional limitations of the lots themselves that would qualify these as affordable housing. The city has not received any drafts of development agreements or deed restrictions that would form the basis of agreements with the city to control the rental or sale of these properties. On to the conditional use permit section of title chapter 17. Staff comment, while a residential use is an outright permitted use in conjunction with a permitted use where the residential use does not exceed 50% of the building's floor area, per 1722-20K, the applicant requests conditional use for single-family and multifamily dwellings in conjunction with a subdivision of a wetland lot of record. Subdivisions or petitions are conditional use when proposed within wetland and wetland buffer areas according to 17, 43, 40, and 45. Therefore, conditional use approval is required for the subdivision of property. The applicable standards for conditional use is 1781-10, as well as the wetland overlay standards for land divisions are addressed for compliance within this narrative. And so I will move on to the 172250, which are the standards under the zoning district. There are no minimum lot size requirements for C1 limited commercial district, except that the density of multifamily dwelling shall be 5,000 square feet for the first unit of the multifamily dwelling plus 2,500 square feet for each additional unit, except that there is no density for multifamily dwellings used for long-term rental purposes 30 days or more, and where a deed restriction is recorded preventing the multifamily dwelling from conversion to condominium use or similar individual ownership arrangement, or use as a short-term rental pursuant to Chapter 1777. The 4 units proposed would therefore require 12,500 square feet, where the lot consists of over 18,000 square feet, meeting this requirement. Parking areas are identified under the parking summary as 10 spaces for 5 single-family dwellings, 4 spaces for 4 multifamily apartments, 14 total spaces, where the plat identifies 13 stalls provided on the common space, lot 1, while 1 would be under the variance request. As this is not a planned development, but a traditional subdivision development, the cluster development variance would be required to specify a parking variance to allow off-street parking to be provided on the common open space lot, off-site or waived and not on the individual lots. If these items are not sought as a variance of the cluster development subdivision, such a request should be made as a condition of the approval. And then under 1743, the wetland overlay zone, staff comment, subject property contains a wetland that was originally mapped for the Cannon Beach Local Wetland Inventory, September 1994. A site-specific wetland delineation has been prepared by the applicant by Critical Areas Consulting, which was then reviewed and approved by the Department of State Lands on July 18, 2022. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and DLL would require any remove or fill permitting if the project were to impact the wetland area. And so I will skip forward to the 1743-50 standards for the wetland area, which begins there on 8 and carries on over to 9. Like I said, under the land subdivision in M, the applicant has prepared a tentative plan that is based on a wetland determination that was prepared by the critical area consultant accepted by ODSL. Each lot is proposed to be over 1,000 square feet requirement for uplands and should be conditioned to contain an upland buildable area larger than 1,000 square feet, serviced by a shared driveway and utility connections that are outside of the delineated wetland and buffer areas. Staff comment on section A there specifies that each lot must contain the 1,000 of the upland and then the required off-street parking, required access for each lot. Each of the 7 lots satisfies this standard, and I list the areas. The wetland area delineated is for 1,200 or 7% of the subject property. Condition of approval would require the applicant to identify the calculations of the uplands on each lot, exclusive of wetlands. And then under E, streets shall not be located in protected wetland or wetland buffer areas. There are no streets contemplated for the 7-lot subdivision, where the parking would be provided from a shared access point off of First Street. Access requirements under 1790-20 require every lot shall abut a street other than an alley for at least 25 feet. Lots which were created prior to adoption of the zoning ordinance, which do not meet this provision, may be accessed via an irrevocable recorded easement of a minimum of 10 feet in width. Each lot could be considered to have well over 25 feet of lot frontage abutting a public street, and yet the cluster development variance allows the planning commission to approve more flexible dimensional requirements that the traditional zoning district restrictions. The fire chief and public works requires that the access easement be of sufficient length with satisfactory turnaround area to handle fire safety concern. Public Works and Cannon Beach Rural Fire have approved plans and it meets criteria. Under chapter 1770, tree removal protection on page 10, staff comment, city has not received a tree removal application as part of the submittal. The tree plan requires a conditional approval, anticipating a tree removal application and subsequent review by the city arborist as part of that. Then under 1780-110, the conditional uses overall use standards, the proposed subdivision in essence would create 8 lots, of which 6 lots could be used for residential development. The city has been approached many times with affordable housing projects, with only one, the Sealark project, approved, which contained a 10-year deed restriction for the 8 units built in 2018. The 2019 Clatsop Housing Strategy Report provides a building land study identifying 5 key findings, including focusing strategies on adding the right types of supply. The study found that there was at the time sufficient supply, but not the right types of housing. The study stated there is technically an oversupply of housing in Clatsop County, yet much of the county's housing supply is not available to local residents. Goal 10 of the Oregon statewide planning goal states to provide for the housing needs of citizens of the state. Buildable lands for residential use shall be inventoried, and plans shall encourage the availability of adequate numbers of needed housing units at a price ranges and rent levels which are commensurate with the financial capabilities of Oregon households and allow for flexibility of housing, location, type, and density. One could argue that Clatsop County's, especially Cannon Beach's, Goal 10 aspirations are 3 to 4 times as challenging as anywhere else in the state due to the simple fact that we are not providing for the housing needs of strictly the citizens of the state, as stated in Goal 10, but the citizens of Washington, Idaho, California, and all those other areas that own and rent the buildable lands and compete for the needed housing in Cannon Beach. Allowing for flexibility of housing, location, type, and density is thus complicated by the limited supply of buildable lands due to both natural constraints and the compounding economic realities. The demand is evident for workforce and affordable housing, but size limitations do not guarantee that the units will be reserved for such. The only guarantee of such use is through the creation of a secondary market, and that can only be accomplished through a lasting agreement. The Planning Commission is faced with making a finding that a demand exists for such housing and in any conditions that might guarantee that it truly needed housing. Staff comment. The proposed lots would fall within the minimum 250 feet service radius of the hydrants and meets all of those criteria for utilities. Staff comment under C. The applicant proposes 5 single-family lots ranging in size from 1757 to 2472 square feet and a 2,143 square foot multifamily lot. Each single family lot will provide private yard space, while the common space provides semi-public areas for parking, access, and garden space. As noted above, an 8th lot should be identified to preserve the wetlands and buffer areas as a condition of approval or described in the variance request. The application approval should also consider a condition limiting any intrusions into the wetland and buffer areas, prescribing fencing and signage for such areas conditionally meets the criterion. Under E, staff report, staff comment. Each lot has well over 25 feet of lot frontage abutting a public street. The fire chief, public works require access. The tentative plan makes use of existing infrastructure and access. The plan provides internal sidewalks, but does not show the extension of the public sidewalk along First Street. A continuation of the existing 10-foot sidewalk from phase 1 of Acola Square should be extended as a condition of approval to the corner of Spruce Street with appropriate ADA accessible features. 2 ADA stalls are provided of the 13 spaces depicted, with the ADA stalls nearest the multifamily units. An enclosed shared refuse area located on the southwest property line mirroring the Ecola refuse collection is provided. When one considers the impacts of such a development, one must weigh the other alternatives. The lot is zoned commercial, where typical off-street parking would equate to approximately 1 space per 400 square feet of gross floor area. In other words, a commercial structure of approximately 6,000 square feet would be required to provide 15 spaces for something equivalent to what is described. A commercial structure is permitted as an outright use in the C1 limited commercial district, and it shouldn't go unnoticed that a wetland lot of record or not, the property owner could propose a commercial structure on any of the other any of the other outright permitted uses of CBMC 172220 with only design review board and administrative approval, as long as the structure and improvements do not impact the wetland overlay zone. And so I have recommended approval with conditions, and those list of conditions, a development agreement containing affordable workforce housing requirements approved by City Council and recorded with Clatsop County, formation of a homeowners association with covenants, conditions, and restrictions describing shared access, parking, and common space maintenance agreements approved by City Council and recorded with Clatsop County, soils and geohazard report approved by the city building official prior to construction, the tree removal application reviewed by the city arborist and approved by the city, plat note indicating no intrusions within the delineated wetland area and buffer areas, including accessory structures, fencing, or pedestrian or vehicular use, and a plat note stating no further partition or subdivision permitted. Any questions?
Would you then consider a separate condition creating an eighth lot, identifying the wetlands and buffer areas?
Yeah.
Okay. There is no other questions. We've covered additional correspondence. Let's move to public testimony. Pertinent criteria to be considered noted in the staff reports and the criteria sheets on the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue preclude appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open. Additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Well, again, I'm David Beneda, Tolavana Architects, Post Office Box 648, Tolavana Park, Oregon, 97145. What I was hoping to do was give you a little background information on this particular project and my involvement with it. I was the original architect for the remodel of Ecola Square that's directly east of this property. Excuse me, directly west of this property. I was the architect of record for the conversion of Ecola Square from full retail to retail with second floor condominiums. I believe it was around 2005, 2007 in my career. I was based in Portland at that time, and that was one of the first projects that brought me to Cannon Beach. That project was done for Mike Clark, longtime landowner in Cannon Beach, that some of you may recall. At that time, he bought the entire parcel of both Ecola Square and what I'm referred to as Ecola Square East that we're really talking about today. So Mike, in his wisdom as a property owner, decided to subdivide that property. And so the parcel that he has now sold to Dave Pieta who I represent today, has purchased that property as a separate parcel. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, it is sat vacant and not been developed since Mike Clark first created that separate, what I call again, Ecola Square East property. I had been commissioned by Mike Clark at that time to do a development option for him for that property. I provided that to staff. They included it in your packet tonight, and basically shows how the property in fact could be developed. And in fact could be developed without a conditional use. And as Jeff pointed out, that particular development would meet the 50% commercial, 50% residential ratio. It would, however, be a much more intense development, generating more traffic, more users of the property than the actual proposals that we have before you tonight. Mike and Dave get to both chose not to pursue this particular level of development. But in fact, to Dave Pietta's credit, he actually met with the relatively new residents of the condominiums in Ecola Square itself that actually front on this project, and determined with them that they would prefer a much less intense level of development. In fact, they would prefer to see a residential scale development instead of a mixed commercial and residential both. So that is what has led me to present to you tonight a scheme showing single family dwellings as well as 4 apartment units fronting on First Street at the north end of the property. Now, those 4 apartment units would in fact be enrolled in the city's affordable housing program. So in answer to your question already, not only would the 5 single family houses be priced as affordable, but it's based on their square footage and size, but in fact, the 4 apartment units would in fact be affordable.
Would there actually be a restriction on the housing as well as the apartment building? So a restriction that would either be on rentals or be sold for the price that was feasible for people who are earning, say, 30 to 80% median income. Will we actually have that in writing?
I know that Dave Pietta, speaking for him, has agreed to the 4 apartment units being affordable housing. I don't know that he's considered the 5 single family dwellings as such.
Your diagram of the cluster, you show building spaces of being 1,019 square feet or roughly that.
Roughly that.
What are the actual floor plans you're considering? How large are the houses?
2-story, 2-bedroom.
Are you gonna go, one's gonna be 5,000 square feet and the rest are gonna be 2,500 square feet? Is that it? Is that how I understood?
All 5 units are, all 5 A11 dwellings are essentially.
You can see on A11, the actual square footage of the units.
Yeah,
There you go. You got it?
no, I've got it here. Thank you.
Yeah, all 5 units are pretty much identical in terms of floor plan.
So that would, those are the square, that's the square footage of those 5, 1,190. That's not the square footage of the building envelope, but the square footage of the structure. Is that correct?
Yes, both floors. That's the total of both floors of the.
I see. Okay, I see.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Neda,
Yes.
but I mean, I know I downloaded all the for sale houses in Cannon Beach now and ones that sold in the past month. And I noted that houses about that size that you're contemplating, there's a house for sale right now that is 1,000 27 square feet.
Mhm.
It's for sale for $1,250,000. There's another house that is 838 square feet living space, and it's for sale for $650,000. There's another house that is 719 feet square living area. It's for sale for $525,000. And similar houses similar prices have sold over the last month in Cannon Beach. So without some kind of restriction on the cost of those 5 houses, it's very likely, and I just don't understand why a builder would agree. Unless they are very altruistic, which might be, or they may be,
Yeah.
to put that kind of a stipulation, or would they be willing to put an affordable housing or a workforce housing stipulation on those 5 lots? Because if they don't,
Mhm.
as new construction, those houses are not going to be affordable. There is no way that any one of them would be under $600,000 or $700,000, probably more.
Yeah.
So given what the price of houses is and the price per square foot
Mhm.
is over $700 a square foot in Cannon Beach right now. So how will, I mean, have they addressed, or does anyone address with them their willingness to make these affordable houses?
I have not had that conversation with, no.
That seems critical to me, you know.
I have a question that, I mean, you have a proposal in front of us and we can make a decision based on what you prepared, but it does seem like this is a site that is committed to commercial development. Your client is making an effort to fully or partially, depending on answers to some of the questions we've asked here, help with sort of situation around affordability in this community. And again, it's hard to even say these words, but I think if we were ever going to stretch, this would be the site we would do it. What if, for example, we were to reach on these single family house 4 or 5 spots and say, hey, what if instead of a house, you put a duplex? It looks like there's some different ideas being kicked around for what this could be. What if we got creative around how many units are allowed on that site? And I realize there's neighbors next door that may not say yes to that. The parking requirement may be too far off. But is there an openness to considering that versus having 5 more houses that are super expensive at an area that's really looking more commercial than it is residential?
Well, I can tell you the approach that Dave Pieta gave me to take on this was really creating beach cottages and scaling them as beach cottages with fenced yards, fenced gardens. And so that kind of individual intimacy of the properties, I think would be counter to a duplex situation, frankly. So it's kind of a counter to the direction that I was given by Dave Pieta and his desire. He's really looking for beach cottages here. And getting back to the scale of Cannon Beach's history of development. So, it is a lofty goal. It's hard I can't really give you a reading on what his motives might be. I don't think it's purely just to make money. I think his heart is in the right place on this. But that's hard to kind of qualify.
Right.
Quantify.
Beach cottages sounds wonderful, but $1 million beach cottage,
Oh, I agree.
because the amount of square footage at this point in time does not guarantee in any way whatsoever that it would be affordable to anyone other than somebody who is fairly wealthy, not middle income people, certainly not, and not certainly not people who are in the workforce. So it'd be great if that could happen, but at this point, we don't know what he has in mind.
Jeff, did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to, say that there's other elements too. I mean, I do want to see, affordable housing and units, but also that parking's part of that ratio too. When you start talking about going from single family to duplex or others, there is all the possibility in the world for a cluster development variance on any of this that we're talking about. But I did want to bring up, parking's part of that ratio as well when you start talking about impact and.
Sure, of course, yeah. Okay, well, just talking out loud, didn't mean to go too far off, but there's a great site. I appreciate your client's effort to try to address a real issue here.
You got more? You have more, don't you, David?
No, I really wanted to just, answer your questions about it. I think it's as compared to what the straight zoning would allow, again, 50% retail, commercial versus 50% residential. I think for this particular site, particularly, it makes sense to go entirely residential as per his proposal and suggestion to me. In terms of, retail use of that site, it's a little bit off the beaten path, if you will. It's off Hemlock. It's surrounded not only by the wetland, but also a parking lot to the north. So in terms of its appropriateness for commercial, it's a bit of a stretch. And so I just think that it makes sense, the use that Dave Pieta is looking to give the site.
I may have misled with the use of the word commercial. I was using commercial with the thought of a little higher density residential.
Oh,
You were going to have, say, and I'm not suggesting this, an apartment building. A commercial zone would be much more appropriate than a straight residential. And so because this is a commercially oriented lot, I'd be more open to more units of that. That's all I was, not necessarily that it had to be retail.
And that's where I kind of got confused with your story. We got that, we got the alternative plan today. Apparently it's not an alternate plan. There's the 8 apartments and
that's correct.
it is, or it is not an.
No, Dave Pieta, you're referring to this plan? Yeah, Dave Pieta is not considering this plan. I just wanted to give you some historical context for what had been considered for the property.
And the neighbors were not really in favor.
No, that's the thing. The neighbors were not in favor of that.
Is the whole east side of that property right of way where most of the wetland lies along the entire eastern border?
That's correct.
Is that right of way?
No, right away for.
City, because
Oh.
you have Hemlock and Spruce Street, and then how many feet from where Hemlock actually goes is the property line? How many feet?
I think that's Spruce Street, if I'm correct.
Right,
But,
Spruce Street.
it's really an irregular line. And so what we did was, Dave Pieta commissioned a update to the wetlands delineation. And that is the line that we use to lay out the units in the property.
There's,
It varies. It's a meandering line.
but part of it is right of way, isn't it?
Well, what's deceiving, I gotta tell you, is that there's the wetland delineation itself, which could overlap onto Spruce Street's right of way, but there's also the vegetation line, which is much larger than the, just by observation, than the wetland boundary itself. So there will be a certain amount of trimming, or I don't think full tree removal. However, we are not against having an arborist study to determine how best to cut or reduce the vegetation line, closely aligned with wetland water. I mean, just the fact that there's trees there will be governed by a tree removal permit process rather than the wetland delineation.
David, the problem I have with this, and I think is maybe the same one Lisa has, is there's not a single dimension on your map. I don't even know where the wetland sits in terms of how far it is off the road, how far it is into the property, where the tree line is. There's no way whatsoever anybody can make a final judgment on your proposal based upon what you've given us, because it's just kind of a, what if? This is what we're thinking right now.
Well, I guess I can provide that information. However, what's pertinent is the wetland determination boundary and the required setback, which is shown on the site plan.
But it gives us no dimensions. So
Can I just say though, Mike, like a delineation for a wetland, it rarely does. You can't because of the.
none of that has any. You can't even try to figure it out, Jeff.
Well,
No,
I'm trying to figure
there
out
is
what
no-
you're asking.
There is no
That's a 5
dimension
feet
up
right
here. There's no dimension along here. There's no dimension anywhere on that map for us to figure out how much this house, SFD 2-story, 2-bedroom, might be encroaching upon those trees, for example. So, the tree plan would be critical to see before we agree,
Well,
notwithstanding the fact that we don't have those dimensions.
saying you're not gonna really get a distance from a wetland. You'll get the 5-foot buffer line, but you're not gonna.
Well, I'd like to see some
Why don't we,
dimensions.
why don't we come back to some of the additional information you'd like to see?
Sure.
As for tree brook, there's not one. Let's.
There's not a
that's something
tree.
You feel strong about, and we can come back to
There was
more
a
detail on the wetland.
geo report that was requested. I think a lot of the conditions you provided were good, but that's kind of the information that we should have seen to approve the plan. I'm not comfortable approving it continue or without seeing some of that information.
Let's come back to that. Mr. Veneta, you mentioned you were here to answer questions. Is there any other part of your formal presentation you'd like us to hear?
No, the Dave Pieta does have extra parking spaces in the US Bank building, just so you guys know. I think staff report indicated we were 1 parking space short. In fact, Dave is willing to provide an agreement for one of the parking spaces that is required for this development to be provided directly across the street in the US Bank parking lot.
You know how many spaces he has in that parking lot?
How many?
Yeah.
I think he determined, and Jeff could help me out here, potentially, I think there's either 2 or 3 access parking spaces over the parking requirement for that building.
Is he on that building?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Veneta?
No?
Thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
your presentation. Thank you. Are there any other presentations by the applicant? Presentations by proponents? Any presentations by? Okay, is there a staff
No,
response?
I think we do.
Do we have one? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please come forward. I was too quick.
Okay. Susan Gorham,
I have not had time to fully research this application. But what I do know is that I object to the approval of the conditional use permit for cluster development CD 22-01 and CU 22-03 in the wetland overlay zone at the southwest corner of First and Spruce Street in downtown Cannon Beach. I believe wetlands are a critically important part of the ecosystem in general and especially important in Cannon Beach since there are so few left within the city. I therefore request that you not act on the permit tonight, but continue this public hearing to next month's meeting.
Thank you. Are there any other presentations by opponents? Please.
Molly Champion, PO Box 614, Cannon Beach. I would like to just start by saying it's all about mitigation, it seems. When the LLC Real Estate and Wetland Developers is demonstrated by Patrick Dave LLC with the Washington and Taft Street development, attempted development of the forested wetland of Forest Lawn with 3 $1 million homes. And now the Dave of Patrick and Dave as Dave Spruce LLC begins another assault on a wetland. They stand assured they will get results and their profits in the city will benefit with property taxes, and the losers will be the integrity of our disappearing natural setting. How can I get to this conclusion? Understanding that not just Cannon Beach, but the state of Oregon and the path allowed for mitigation of all state wetlands. I had an opportunity to hear the head of the Aquatic Resource Plans under the Oregon Department of State Lands speak. The presentation was clearly covered that wetland designation throughout the state and within each county and city are all easy prey for mitigation. If a well-used process is used as shown in a PowerPoint and accompanied handout tutorial, and I do have that tutorial here. Cannon Beach years ago plotted within the city boundaries, designated sites labeled wetlands. When there is a consideration of development of certain wetlands, the Army Corps of Engineers is given approval that they just don't need jurisdiction or involvement. In other words, it's a pass. Then there is the engineering study and eventually a series of development plans. Next is mitigation. The developer talks of boundaries, setbacks, protections, and permits, and are often denied, and more mitigation when finally the wetland is developed. Drive by Hill Street, drive by North Hemlock Street, take a look at the building on Dawes, and then wonder how the forested wetland on Forest Lawn will eventually receive mitigation at Luba possibly, and now First and Spruce under the guise of cluster homes. But wait, I have to strike that because their MO is to tell the neighbors and adjacent developers one thing, then present another, and then change again, perhaps again. It is their strategy, the usual ploy of Dave and Patrick and Dave as they play the mitigation game and continually change the project that will end up in greater mitigation and another wetland hits the dust. This is still being accomplished while an overview realization across the globe that trees and wetlands are nature's answer to stem global warming and all the terms that translate to the destruction that we currently have taken for granted of our natural world, and now the consequences of flagrant misuse, except for here in Clatsop County and Cannon Beach. It seems global warming is not a factor here. Our TSP plan has not proposed a limitation on polluting traffic, has no significant EV installation plans, and we have not moved to institute codes to begin green building for all city buildings, remodels, or new construction requirements. And most visible, allowing tree cutting as usual with no signs of replacement. In Britain right now, they are reconstituting all of their wetlands across the entire countries. In checking this, they are planting trees and making sure their wetlands are once again active. They turn the tide on droughts and control flooding. Here we continue to cut trees and not replace them. I don't know if any of you are going to go to Ross and Spruce on Monday, but they'll be cutting down 8 huge trees that won't be replaced. And encouraged by offering draining to developers and agreeing to mitigation of our wetlands for exchange for property tax and happy developers, and assisted by the state that was supposed to protect, but too often use LUBA to find development over the diminishing environment. Watch Dave Spruce LLC and Patrick Dave LLC continue their devious ability to tweak plans, change direction, and eventually get their profits as the city and or LUBA allows mitigation of their purchased wetland property in some agreed plan that will meet the fabricated use and need for that development. The city and county will sweep in the benefits of more property tax dollars with some more tax dollars, not for workforce people, but by those who afford second homes, expensive units, and allow the wink wink of family use. This leaves you, the city council, and the community to ask, how long will we choose to keep ignoring the impending crisis, climate change? Because as to quote Al Gore, it's just an inconvenient truth. They chose to buy at cheap, choosing a profit, and taking extra steps, ever participating in sustaining this environment while declaring their love of community. Please make it an ongoing, untenable, and time and expensive attorney fee consuming process. Thank you, and I have some more names for collecting. I have 5 more sheets up, and I also have a tutorial. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Champion. Are there other presentations by opponents? Please come forward.
I'm Jan Siebert Warmond, and this letter is also from my husband, Wes Warmond. P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach, 97110. Dear Cannon Beach Planning Commissioners, regarding the CD 22-01 and CU 22-03 request for a conditional use permit to allow a cluster development consisting of 5 single-family dwellings and a 4-plex apartment, as was noticed for this public hearing tonight, we have some concerns. The application put forth by David Beneda on behalf of David Pietka, later mentioned as David Spruce LLC, is said in the summary and background report to be a quote tentative plan approval request of a subdivision of tax lot 51030 AA 04402. We'd like to know what the term tentative means in this case. The proposed project site is in the wetland overlay zone. The application, as we understand it, does not include the United States Army Corps of Engineers jurisdictional determination. Isn't that document necessary for a complete application? What does constitute a complete application? And what may still be missing here? In David Veneda's application, he stated that this development would, quote, provide much needed affordable housing in downtown by providing small single-family dwellings and apartments, end quote. What development agreement or deed restriction with the city would control the rental or sale of these proposed properties? Time and time again, we've witnessed supposed affordable housing projects be promised and then be switched later to regular market-priced housing at Palm Beach. It appears there's no soils or geohazard report. Why has this not been required before this application was considered to be complete? Where is the application and the subsequent review by our city arborist? Where is the guarantee that no intrusions would be made into the wetland area and buffer areas? How are we as a community guaranteed that this partition would really be used for what the applicant says? What is the guarantee that no further partition or subdivision would be allowed? With all of the above concerns, we urge you to not grant this application on approval. We request that you continue this public hearing to next month's meeting. There seem to be so many unanswered questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Are there any other presentations by opponents? Is there a staff response?
No?
Would the applicant like to make any other proponents of this project like to make additional statements? Okay. We'll close the public testimony portion of this hearing at this time and move to our conversation.
I think it's pretty clear we need to continue this.
We've got the request, so we will be continuing it. Do we want to discuss it before that continuation? Or
Well, yeah, it's just the stuff we need, I think. I mean, there's a lot.
You could just go down the,
want to outline what we'd like to see?
Well, we need to know whether the applicant,
down the condition.
The conditions you put up.
the applicant,
Yeah, I think you did a good job of capturing.
would the applicant be willing on the houses, not just the apartment buildings, on the houses to put a deed restriction for affordable housing or middle income housing? That would be my first question.
That certainly is
Or-
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
You could on you could on rentals.
If you make if you dedicate the houses as rental?
No, you just say no rentals. I think you could probably put that.
I'm saying, how do you?
No short-term rentals.
Yeah, no short-term rental.
right, but I mean, what, there are gonna end up being four
I know.
houses for high income people.
Hmm.
And that is not the need that we have.
No, it's not. I'm wondering if the applicant also is willing to adjust the percentage of the houses versus apartments a little bit to make it a little bit more palatable for us to undertake a development that might harm this wetland. I mean, I think we got some more apartments out of it, and that's why I wondered that 8 apartment proposal with no commercial zone, no commercial buildings look pretty attractive to me. But I guess that's not on the table. I'm wondering if we can resurrect something like that.
Well, it's not up to us to resurrect.
Oh, but it's worth asking. I mean, can we ask, or we can't talk to them, can we?
Why do you think that would be less impactful on the wetland?
What's the difference? I think there's a couple issues. One is the affordability issue and the other is the wetland.
Right.
So
So
it addresses the affordability. It doesn't address.
Is big because because that will drive whether or not under the current state law, you're stuck because what needed housing allows them to build. If you look at the cases that are out there, one after another, if it's needed housing, they can build on wetlands, so.
No, if we stop them from building on wetlands, I can't, but as long as we hold our wetlands open, then we have a little bit of.
No.
It's commercial. We don't get to say it all.
We don't get to say it all in commercial, and for housing, what happened with the last application is we decided as a commission that it didn't fit under the definition of needed housing,
I agree.
okay? So if this is not needed housing,
Not needed housing.
what I'm saying, the affordability drives the rest of it, drives the rest of the application.
Totally agree.
To a point, we could put this developer into a position where he goes, well, if you're not going to do that, then I'm just going to do what I know I can get.
Right.
And there may be an opportunity here to work with a developer to address something that we know is a concern in this community. I'm not touching the wetland just yet. And see if there's some potential on that lane to move the needle forward meaningfully. These houses, you're right, they're not affordable. I don't know how you put an affordability restriction on a house. You can't tell them you can sell them for some price. You can on rental properties, but you can't do that on for sale properties. So we really don't have a lot of avenues to control the pricing.
Long-term rentals. Unless they were going to be long-term rental.
And at that point, if I'm a developer, that doesn't make economic sense. I'm going to go for something more commercial.
Tell you the truth, having them be affordable doesn't make economic sense either.
If you have enough of them, it might.
Well, enough.
So then if Jeff, and I just had this idea, I'm not sure I'm right on this, and I'm not even, I kind of hesitate to bring it up just because it probably means another special meeting, but he has the US Bank building. The impact on that building, the use of that parking lot is by day. What if we gave a break on the parking requirement to get more units that people could afford by saying that the tenants parked in that space at night?
You have with this as a cluster development, you can.
If we're going to dive into cluster developments.
If you want to, if it's a cluster.
So the point there is if we're going to allow cluster development, which has been a cluster of another sort when we've even touched it. If we're going to allow that, we may as well try to get creative. We've got a lot more tools at our disposal to help the city. There are a lot of ways to get more units here to make this more financially feasible. But we've got to be creative, and that I'm not touching the wetland just yet. I think there's work to be done on that side. But if there was if there's any bandwidth on this, I think we should be open to it.
Well, that completely negates the possibility of a single family dwelling then.
It would take the single family dwelling out because we know where that's,
Have to, because it's not going to be affordable.
right. It will not be affordable. You know, you
It
had
feels a little bit like, I hate to say it, but it feels a little bit like blackmail. Like you either give us what we want,
How
you
about
know,
negotiations?
or, yeah,
We're gonna negotiate.
yeah.
I look at it more as a negotiation, as an opportunity. I mean, I didn't sense that in listening to Mr. Beneda or looking at multiple plans presented in front of us, that there wasn't an openness for other ideas.
And I didn't get a sense that there was. Either way, actually, because this application is so far.
Well, there's that too.
In any way, shape or form that.
Yeah.
And I,
no way.
and I say that this is the first one that we've had a verbal commitment to go with any affordable housing since CLARC. So since I've been here, that's the commitment right there.
So for the apartment,
Didn't we have one on the earlier, that was no commitment?
Never had any commitment.
Oh, that changes that.
so that's for the apartment. So you're
Yeah.
So to the wetland side of this and some of the completeness, you know, I've heard you say, and I can see why, there's some gaps to be filled in the application. There's been a request for a continuance. And certainly we know that has meant, you know, additional thinking.
I want to say too, I agree with Clay. I mean, if we're going to compromise on anything, this one might be the one to compromise on, as long as we can protect that wetland in some way, but we don't know. I am willing to give up a piece of property to get affordable units. And we all should be. But it is connected with wetland for me, and I'm not going to talk about anything until we see how that plays in.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
I want to be very clear that get some solid conditions on approval so that the plan couldn't change later.
I think we wait first. I mean, until we see some reports, no.
But I mean, even with the reports, it's approved. I think we need to be sure that when we talk about things like will it be affordable housing, how many units of this will be affordable versus not affordable?
Has to be nailed
They're
down.
nailed down. Because this is pretty tentative.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Can I just, one more comment that we are still under that 120-day clock. So I know it's figured out at September 22nd. Wait, no, let's see. November 5th, 2022 is the date that this has to be completed through.
November what? Sorry, Jeff.
November 5th, 2022.
Do you want to state the specific, you had mentioned some items that you wanted to see, the wetland report?
Well, I
You want-
would
you
like to
want to give
see the update to the wetland delineation. I'd like to see a map with the wetland clearly marked on it and then the dimensions of the property and the tree line.
So an arborist report?
The arborist report, there's talk of the geo report here. I think the applicant needs to figure out what exactly it's going to offer us to make this palatable. And I mean, in terms of affordable housing, and I don't think they've given us their best offer yet.
I don't think it's an offer thing to me, it's a conversation.
Well,
That making it clear that we do have a very strong priority in this city.
Right.
On affordable units.
Mm.
How do we make this work for everyone? Because I agree, they can't do it at a loss. So how do we
yep.
find that middle ground?
But to be completely honest, we don't have as much leverage as you're pointing out that we have. Because they could just go ahead and build a commercial building if they wanted. So we have to keep that in mind.
That's true.
Right there on that wetland.
I don't think Dave Spruce is in the business of building and selling commercial properties, but you're right. There is no money in that.
I don't know what he's in the business of doing.
And I don't, by the way, I don't give that up lightly. That wetland is important. I mean, there's another thing. I looked at the flood map. That wetland looks like flood patch basin to me for water coming out of Pompeii wetland and coming down that hill. So what are they going to do to protect those units from flood when it happens? Because it will.
You could build a berm. You
Yeah.
could build a berm along the
Yeah.
wetland.
That's right.
And you may have to give up a couple square feet here and there to do that.
Yeah.
But a berm would protect not only the buildings, but it would also protect the wetland.
That's a good idea.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a request for continuance. This moves to next month's meeting.
Well.
Bill, did you have your hand up, Bill?
Yes, when you said it moves to next month's meeting, I want to make sure that I
Oh, thank you.
understand.
Yes,
It's
Yes.
777, or is it, you're going to have oral presentations next?
you're
year?
right. We don't
I
want to
think
miss
it's gotta be
that.
the whole thing. They didn't give us anything here. We need,
No, remember we talked about this? We don't want to do that 30-day because what happens is day 29, we get a bunch of stuff.
no, we gotta talk about that in our training. Because that's not right. There's nothing in the law that says we have to consider that stuff.
I think we do have to consider
I
it.
don't know.
So I think let's stick with our game plan, which was the 777. Some of these reports, I believe they probably have the wetland delineation. They probably have that.
Yeah, it's in
It's in there, that delineation?
It's in the packet. I don't remember seeing that. Is the full delineation?
attached to the states, not the whole, it's not the full delineation.
Yeah.
I think that was-
Full delineation.
It's got the,
I saw some of it. I saw some of it. So, yeah, Bill, will you walk us all through this, how the 777 process works?
If the planning commission wants to go to the 777, the way it would work is that any and all parties could submit any information of any length in writing to the city no later than 5 p.m. 7 days from today, which is Thursday, September 1st. Then any and all parties could submit rebuttal evidence and arguments, only rebutting what came in previously up until 5 p.m. on Thursday, September 8th. So the first is anything and everything. The second is only rebuttal response to what is already in. And then the applicant would have a final 7 days until Thursday, September 15th at 5 o'clock to submit their final written argument. No new evidence, only argument.
Okay.
And then you would have, I believe the planning commission's meeting would be a week later on the 22nd. And so you'd have a week to have that materials to review and be prepared to make your decision, including, possibly a decision that insufficient evidence was provided for the applicant to make their point, if in fact you don't have it.
Okay. I'm seeing heads nodding. Is that yes?
Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
All right. So that's how we'll do it then. This item is moved to next month's meeting. Will the 777 plan as outlined by the city's council. Okay. We are moving on to our work session item.
Ariana.
I think that's a work session item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have another. There's 2 work session items.
Yeah, we moved one to the front.
Oh, so
Is there another?
letter.
The letter, yes, right. That's where I was going.
11. Oh, okay.
Bill, you had some concerns about the letter. Do you,
Yes.
actually, do we want to take a 5-minute break? Everybody okay? Or do we want to keep going here?
Go.
Keep going. I'm just.
Keep going.
Tell us how you really feel. Let's keep going. Do it, Bill.
Okay, and we had some brief discussion about this, and new information came in this afternoon that I think impacts it as well. Earlier today, the applicant for the forest lawn development filed an appeal of your decision denying it to the city council, and so that's going to go to the city council in the next, I'm not certain exactly when, but sometime relatively soon. And given that the issues in the letter are really intertwined with the issues at the issues in the Forest Lawn decision, I would suggest it may be useful to delay deliberating and making a decision about this letter until after that appeal is resolved, and a couple different reasons. One, you don't want to do something in the process of considering this letter that would prevent the Planning Commission from hearing a remand or hearing something related to this in the future. And so I want to be careful about doing that. Also, don't want something here to, that's outside of the decision, then come up and make its way to the city council process and kind of fouling that up. So my advice to you would be to hold off for just a little bit while the city council has a chance to process this appeal, and then come back to it when that appeal is over. And I think Jeff might be able to give a little insight into when that is, but that would be my thought that I wanted to communicate.
Bill, a quick question. We were addressing, I think, partly the stormwater issue in this letter. And we were told repeatedly that stormwater was not part of that application. And now we're being told that it is. And I'm wondering whether we need to go back and reopen the application and evaluate in terms of the fact that we don't have a solution on that stormwater.
Well, two things. First, you don't have the ability to go back and reopen it. So, you've made your decision, move on. Second, I continue to believe that the stormwater, the question of how the city stormwater system is set up is separate from the application. I think I was the one who suggested initially the idea of separating them and putting into this letter. However, I don't think you can talk about them, without going, morphing over into it. And it's really, could you follow up on this letter? Absolutely. It's more about an abundance of caution and making sure that something that happens here doesn't interfere with the Planning Commission's authority in the future. That's my concern and fear, and why I'm bringing this to you.
On a somewhat related note, just for clarification, because we've had some conversations around this, and I know we have some training coming up and that'll help with this. But in terms of this process with the forest lawn application, will you clarify whether or not new information can be submitted by any party to this package that's being presented to City Council?
So under the, and I'm trying to pull it up now, public deliberations and hearing, when appeal is requested, the default position is that no new evidence can be submitted. However, there are certain circumstances where an appellant can request that new information be brought in. 1788-160, and an appeal of a planning commission decision, the reviewing body, the city council, may determine as a non-public hearing item that the scope of review will be restricted to the record, limited to the admission of additional evidence on such issues as the council determines necessary, remanded the matter to the planning commission for additional consideration. And oh shoot, I just lost it. And where do we go? 1788-170 says, unless otherwise provided, it'll be confined to the record. So the default is confined to the record, no new evidence. However, appellants can request it. And in this case, the appellant has in fact requested that the record be open to new evidence.
And so if the appellant asks that additional evidence be allowed to be submitted, does that open it up entirely, or does it just open it up for them?
So I just saw the appeal earlier today and didn't really have a chance to dig into what they're asking. I think they're asking about specific issues, and the city council can limit it just to specific issues. But that's a decision that the city council will have to make prior to their hearing about whether to allow new evidence. So, the simplest answer to your question is, it's possible that new evidence can come in. That's up to the city council.
Okay. But the package presented to the city council comes from the city. It comes from ultimately from the planning commission through the planning director's office to the council. There's no information submitted to the city council directly by the appellant unless the city grants them that request, that
And
option.
to be clear, no, that's about evidence. What is evidence? The statute defines evidence as information and testimony as to whether a particular criteria have or have not been satisfied. The appellant and other parties can submit argument. They can stand up in front and say, well, the evidence shows that the wetland ends here and this, the house isn't going to be put on the wetland. What they can't do is submit a new wetlands delineation showing that in fact the wetlands was elsewhere. It sometimes gets a little esoteric about what is or isn't new evidence, but the limitation is on new evidence. But there's certainly the opportunity to submit new argument regardless of whether the council allows new evidence or not.
Okay, thank you.
Is the packet online now?
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Oh, it is.
So it's
The
the,
appeal?
Yeah.
No, the appeal just came in today, so.
Oh.
No,
No, I meant the appeal.
and it hasn't been put on an agenda.
Not yet. I mean,
Well, we would do the scope of reviews, the first thing.
yeah, we have to do the scope of review and then it would go to a hearing and have to have a 20-day window to notify.
Well, we knew that was gonna happen.
So back to the letter, we have the city council's advice. Thoughts?
Oh, it's a tough one.
I tend to want to be cautious.
I think so too.
Add fuel to fires. We did a very good job with our.
Yeah, I tend to
Want
agree.
to jeopardize in any way our findings and conclusions for that application.
And so, Bill, just for my own understanding of this process, we have a letter in the public record.
Yes.
Is it not ratified by the fact that we haven't voted as a body to accept it? Is it still a discussion point? Or why is that? Why are we not? Why isn't it already a risk or a liability out there to this process?
You hit the point on the head. The planning commission has made no decision or discussed it. What you have is a proposed letter.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I think with that in mind, we probably should.
Yeah.
We all agree on that?
Wait,
Aaron, Charles, do you agree with that idea that we wait?
I agree. Totally.
Charles, you're muted. If you said something, we couldn't hear you.
Hang on. Yes, I agree totally.
Okay, I think that's consensus then.
Yep.
All right. We'll move on from that. We'll hold off on that. Information items, a tree report. Any comments on the tree report?
45 trees for the right of ways.
So no, this is a very special circumstance here. I don't know if you're familiar with the substation at Sunset.
No.
I'm gonna bring up here what we have. Because I processed, it's not as scary as you're thinking. So, okay. Pacific Power has this substation here.
Right.
Okay, the subject area was about a 40-foot deep strip of land right adjacent to the substation.
Right.
It was overgrown and Pacific Power was reacting because one tree had collapsed and struck the fence. And they were concerned about a number of other trees in there that were leaning at significant angles and posing hazards as far as being able to strike infrastructure, causing disruptions, and also potentially igniting fire. So there was a lot of pressure from the applicant, from the contractor, to just get an emergency, let us go in and do what we want. We made them go through the process. We did have arborist reports prepared, and we also had Mr. Balden subbing in for Mr. Gearhart as the arborist because Mr. Gearhart wasn't available. So this was the authorization of removal of up to 45 alder trees that were generally about maybe from here to here in diameter. It was not authorizing removal of any sort of conifers, no Sitka spruce, nothing like that. So effectively, this was a kind of a vegetation reduction project in order to prevent those alder trees from having the opportunity to strike the infrastructure and or make contact with power lines, resulting in disruptions to service or possibly even causing fire.
And the report says you're still trying to find a place to plant 45 trees, right?
We are looking at opportunities either in the area, and Pacific Power indicated that they would be willing to consider planting elsewhere in the community, yes.
Repeat that, please.
Repeat what?
What you just said, the last one.
The Pacific Power is working to do replanting in the area and also has expressed willingness to replant elsewhere in the community.
So there's no opportunity to go in and just plant some more trees in that space that we just clear cut, huh?
Right now, it's not clear cut.
Okay,
No, it's absolutely not clear cut. This was effectively an overgrown thicket.
yeah,
And so this was more of a thinning than anything else.
thank you, Robert.
And I think it's a very safe.
Well, I know that, after the fires in California, you can't mess with power lines and trees, right? They don't go together.
I was in Oregon,
Yeah.
just try through that destruction.
Yeah,
And this makes, I love trees, but this makes perfect sense.
yeah, it does, especially if you're gonna replant them somewhere.
We'll help them replant those.
Yeah.
And I really kudos to the city for making them go through the process.
Stand it up, yeah.
Allowing them to do whatever they wanted. I think that's great.
Thank you.
Other comments on the tree report?
No.
Ongoing planning items, any update on other planning items?
We, like I said, well, first off, we are going to, I don't know if this is on the appropriate time, but we're gonna do the training. One of the questions I have is you guys look at your calendars and see if instead of the, well, we thought about doing it as the fourth, as a work session item next planning commission meetings, but they're getting so full and so packed. If you guys could be available the third Thursday at 6 p.m. during when the DRB would normally meet, their agendas aren't as full and we could put it on their agenda and call all the planning, all the commissions and boards to a training and ethics session at that time.
How long is the training?
It would be an hour.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do it, we're gonna Zoom it if we have to, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we could do Zoom and, I would just think that that way we're not, all these are going to be continued except for the TSP. So it's going to be a full agenda. I don't know what else is out there, but likely there's some others coming at us. So if you want to just email me at your availability, you can do
Yeah,
that.
just assume I'll be there by Zoom or in person.
Okay.
All right, we'll do.
And then the other thing was, let's see, so.
We do have the annual living will report. if anybody has-
Just 1 second though, September 7th is that joint work session with on the code audit.
So is the training for sure gonna be on the 15th or you're gonna,
Not for sure. Let me check every, see what I get back and
so
then
you'll get back?
we'll let you know, but hopefully first thing next week.
Third Thursday is the 15th. Okay. Oh, Okay. Under the good of the order, I see there is a your article or someone else, article?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've got a article on vacation rentals are exacerbating the housing crisis on,
No, the one for Hawaii or something like that.
and then one from something. Yeah.
One was the interview on OPB.
Yeah, so we got a couple of those in there. And so if we get those kind of materials from other planning commission members or the public, we'll put them in the good of the order.
Good. Thank you.
And I just wanted to make an announcement for the good of the order that there is a referendum circulating right now, signatures for a referendum regarding Short-term rentals in Clatsop County, the county commissioners approved unlimited short-term rentals in Clatsop County, including Cove Beach and a lot of other places. And so the people in the area have formed a petition and they're getting signatures to get it on the ballot.
And this is in unincorporated.
Yeah, Clatsop County, right.
And not Arch.
Arch Cape isn't included because Arch Cape has always had sort of special conditions and they have been dissolved for the most part, but that one is still intact. I think that Arch Cape is a thorn in the county side and they'd just rather not deal with them. So they've just said, yeah, we'll leave it like it is, even though it's not great. But at least the Arch Cape people can own it because they're the ones who came up with it originally.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
Well, I'd like to say one more time, Lisa, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lisa.
my pleasure, really.
And don't be a stranger. Sit right out there.
Or even get up there and talk.
I can, and I probably will.
We'll have fun with that.
I've been really nice here.
We do need a motion for the orders.
Okay, may I have a motion to assign the appropriate orders? Did we-
So moved.
I'll second.
Maybe we vote on that, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Scott,
Yeah.
What are we voting on?
Signing the appropriate orders.
Which
The
one?
TSP.
Oh, okay.
TSP.
Commissioner Matusek,
Sorry, yes, sorry.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz. Commissioner Bennett,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes,
Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay. That in mind, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.